Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined once again, and as always, by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. Good to have you both back. And on tonight's episode, we're going to discuss pitching. The Orioles' Major League pitching staff is doing really well right now. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to get into Norfolk, where there was a combined no-hitter over the weekend with Chase McDermott, one of the Orioles' top pitching prospects, leading the way as the starter. But first, we want to welcome a new sponsor to Orioles on the Verge, and that is Bet Online, your number one source for all summer sports this season from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And now we'll get into tonight's episode. But first, one more thing to promote here at the top, which is that on Saturday, we'll be live at Checker Spot Brewing starting at 2 p.m. If you have tickets to the Orioles Diamondbacks game that afternoon, stop by ahead of time. Checker Spot is just a short distance from Orioles Park at Camden Yards. If you don't have tickets, come watch the show and hang out afterwards. Checker Spot's going to have the game on. We'll have a viewing party there. I can confirm that Checker Spot is a good place to watch the game. Bob, Nick, and I will be on the air, and we'll be joined by friend of the show and host of Locked On Orioles, Connor Newcomb. We might have more guests to announce between now and then, so stay tuned to our socials. So whether you've got tickets to the game, you just want to hang out in the area during the game, or you're going to be the guest splasher on Friday night, and you want to unwind on Saturday afternoon and hang out with some Orioles fans and talk some Orioles baseball, you're welcome to stop by. Checker Spot Brewing, located a short distance from Camden Yards. Come check us out Saturday, May 11th at 2 p.m.
And if I can interject,
yes,
patrons, you get a free beer based off Checker Spot, what they told us. Join a Discord. If you're a patron, we will give you the code there. And here's a little tip for you guys that aren't patrons yet. You can sign up for as low as $3, and that's a cheap beer for the month.
Absolutely. So one more incentive to join Patreon, and we're going to drop our new top 50 later this week, so you're not going to want to miss that. Let's start off, though, with the Major League pitching staff on this episode, which has gotten a lot more interesting here in the last week or so. On one hand, you have the bad, which is that Grayson Rodriguez goes on the 15-day IL with shoulder inflammation. On the other hand, the Orioles pitching staff was flat out dominant last week. Since their 7-6 loss to the A's on April 28th, the Orioles have not surrendered more than 2 runs in a single game. And they were at their best in Cincinnati over the weekend with wins of 3-0, 2-1, and 11-1. John Means and Kyle Braddis both making strong returns from their respective injuries. Cole Irvin continues to pitch really well in the rotation. And we're going to get into the AAA staff in a little bit here and looking specifically at their combined no-hitter over the weekend. But, Nick, I want to start with you. We're kind of seeing now that the starting rotation is settling in a little bit, even with the injury to Rodriguez. You have Braddis, you have Means back. Irvin is throwing really well. Corbin Burns looks like an ace at the top of the rotation. Do you think that this is sustainable? And if so, what does it say about the Orioles going forward for the rest of the season?
I think overall, generally speaking, yes, it is sustainable just because there are a lot of different arms that the Orioles could use in this situation. Even with Rodriguez down, you're looking at a pretty deep, solid rotation. And Rodriguez comes back. You've got Cade Povich down in AAA pitching well, but you got Albert Suarez now moved to the bullpen. I just think that the Orioles can keep things fresh and moving along this season, barring the Orioles have been super, super lucky this year as far as injuries are concerned. And as long as that trend keeps going, like pray to whoever you need to pray to, knock on wood, whatever you need to knock on, that keeps going. But as long as that continues, like this team can continue to kind of move guys in and out. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's pretty awesome that I feel like every couple of weeks since the season has started, we get to sit on here and talk about some new topic that's like I never dreamed of us being able to talk about that particular topic. And like right now, it's like, how good is the major league pitching? How are we going to fit all of these guys into the major league rotation that are pitching so well? When like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, well, we're actually like 3 or 4 weeks into the regular season now. So like 2, 3 months ago, uh, I was waiting every day for that like Orioles right-handed pitcher Kyle Bradish undergoing Tommy John surgery today. Like I was waiting for that tweet to happen. You're watching John Means in those rehab outings, and I know lots of conversations about John Means and what he does in those rehab outings and everything, and what those rehab outings mean. But you watch John Means in those rehab outings and know that he really hasn't been. He's crossed 150 innings once in his 7-year pro career. One of those years was 2020, but still, he's really hasn't been available the last couple of years. And you're worried, like, how are you going to fill out this rotation? And now we've got too many arms, even with Grayson Rodriguez on the IL. We got a pretty stacked staff, and you're like, how do we get these guys enough innings? It's a fun problem to have, and I do think that this is sustainable, just because, like, all right, Grayson comes back, and you're moving either Kramer or Irving to the bullpen. Like, that's huge. You could give another guy, you could say, like, oh, Kramer's a little tight today. After this start, I'll put him on the IL, right? Now it's your turn to go get a 15-day break, and we'll throw Albert Suarez in for 2-3 starts while you take a little extra time. Like this is fun. I don't want to be too overconfident because we're watching pitchers drop like flies out here across the landscape. But I mean, right now things going pretty well for the Orioles, and it's fun to sit here and talk about Cade Povich shoving down in AAA, one of the top pitchers in AAA, behind Paul Skeens. Yet we're like, we don't need him up here in the major leagues right now. Like it feels pretty good.
Yeah, I was on vacation this past week. I was on a Disney cruise. I think the Orioles probably gave up 5 or 6 runs in the entire week I was gone almost. Yeah, when I first saw the news that Grayson Rodriguez was on the IL, it seemed to come out of nowhere from what I can tell. Obviously, a shoulder for a pitcher is always a scary injury because it's not as clear cut as the Tommy John or just elbow stuff in general. But now that it just seems like, I would not say phantom IL. I am sure that there's an actual soreness here, but it seems pretty normal, nothing too out of the ordinary. And I think the fact that he's already throwing off flat ground again, like less than a week later, is a pretty good sign that he'll be back relatively soon. And I don't even think, Nick, you mentioned Tyler Wells will be back at some point this season, hopefully. And that's just another boost to the bullpen. Yeah, the bullpen was struggling there for a minute or two, but then Ciona Perez came back. He's looked pretty good since he returned from his IL stint. Obviously, you get Means and Bradish back. That's going to push a guy like Suarez into the bullpen, who got his first outing on Sunday, pitched 2 1/3 scoreless. I think his stuff's going to play up out of the bullpen. I think honestly, he could be in the mix for closer at some point if Kimbrel's back doesn't stop acting up on him. Yeah, I think there's nothing other than thrilled to be about the Orioles pitching. I think the team ERA is right around 3.30 as a team. Crazy. The WHIP is 1.10 as a team. The FIP is 3.68 from what I have here, and that seems pretty sustainable to me based on the numbers here. Not really walking too many guys. Strikeouts are just under a batter per inning as a staff. Yohan Ramirez getting claimed by the Mets. That might hurt a little bit, but no. Other than that, yeah. I mean, to me, John Means was the big story. It's like I will never worry about a John Means rehab again, even if there is likely not to be, hopefully, another one in an Orioles uniform. Everyone's worried. Means is cooked. He's done. Comes out and probably pitches a game that's on par with his no-hitter that he threw in Seattle. 7 shutout innings, no walks, 8 strikeouts. Gotta love it. And Bradish beating him back to the majors, like Nick said, if you told me that in spring training, no chance I believe you. But Bradish looked great. Obviously, they're going to be a little bit careful with his innings. Should have got out of that first inning super cleanly. Weird stuff went on there. He escaped it. Couldn't finish 5, but he seems like he's just Kyle Bradish for the rest of the season, which you got to love.
So, Bob, on the Disney cruise, are there any characters on there that are surprisingly into baseball? I'm curious.
I couldn't find one. Captain Jack Sparrow, I think he was too drunk to to really have a conversation whatsoever. But no, it was a fun time, but there was not much baseball talk to be had. So glad to be back here. And I mean, it was a good time. I'm not saying I'm so glad it's over, but I did miss the baseball of it all. So ready to get back in the mix. I don't think I'll be on another vacation this year unless we get like 700 new patrons. So yeah, I'm here for baseball season.
We'll send Bob and his family on another vacation and sign up for Patreon today. Going back to the Orioles pitching staff, and Nick just mentioned that one of these two pitchers might have to move back to the bullpen when Grayson Rodriguez returns. So I want to talk about Cole Irvin and Dean Kramer for a minute. Irvin has now thrown 20 and 2/3 scoreless innings in a row. Kramer, meanwhile, coming off a really good start against the Reds on Sunday, 6 shutout innings, just 1 hit allowed, 6 strikeouts to 1 walk. And I had made the point before about Kramer on this show that I think if Kramer was on another team, Orioles fans would look at him as like, why can't we trade for a guy like that? Put him in the back of your rotation. He's not going to cost you a whole lot in terms of money or prospects. But because Orioles fans live with the highs and lows of Kramer from start to start, they're a little harder on him than they would be otherwise. I actually think that he fills a pretty valuable role in the rotation at this point. So, Nick, I'll go back to you. Just looking at Irvin and Kramer specifically, if one of them does have to go to the bullpen, who is it going to be? And with what they're doing right now, and I'm thinking more so about Irvin with his scoreless inning streak, is there a possibility that either of them are in line for a really good season?
This is a tough one because I have a lot of respect for Dean Kramer, to be honest. And I remember, was that 2 years ago, whenever it was, when they had sent him back down to AAA. And I remember us talking about Kramer, and it was that Nashville. Was that Nashville or Memphis? It was Memphis, where Norfolk, every time they went to Memphis, it was a disaster, to put it nicely. And there was a Dean Kramer start, I'm pretty sure that was in Memphis, where his body language, he just looked dejected. Like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. It looked terrible, and you just felt bad for him. But I was kind of out on Dean Kramer at that point, thinking he's not going to be able to rebound from this and get back to the major leagues. And he eventually did. And he had a great season last year. And I firmly believe that he can be a really solid 4 or 5 starter for you. And I think that's exactly a great point that Zach had, that, yeah, if he's on another team pitching as well, like, this is a guy who I think a lot of Orioles fans are anxiously saying, like, let's go after him to shore up the back end of the rotation. You do have to live with the highs and lows, and maybe he's not the guy, we talked about this before, maybe he's not the guy that makes the playoff starting rotation, but to be your number 5 over the course of a regular season, Dean Kramer is not a bad guy to have. There are a lot worse pitchers out there that you could have at your number 5. But like, when you look at what Cole Irvin is doing and some of his numbers, I don't know. Like, I'm going to ride the hot hand right now. And I think if everybody is healthy, if Grayson Rodriguez is coming back in a couple of days or a week or so, whenever, I don't know how much longer he has on his IL stint, but if everybody is healthy and you've got to move one of these guys to the bullpen, I'm probably putting Dean Kramer down there for right now, just because I think he could be really effective for, 2 innings here, 2 innings there. I'm curious to know if he actually could hold up. Cole Irvin seems like the more logical fit, but I mean, you look at Cole Irvin's like baseball savant page, and I mean, he's not getting the whiffs, he's not getting chased, like, he doesn't have the big fastball velo, but he's not walking guys. He's in the 82nd percentile in ground ball rate. He's got an ERA of 2.86. His expected ERA is 3.73, and a lot of Dean Kramer's peripherals are a lot worse. Like, Cole Irvin's the average, you look at how hard guys are hitting the ball of Cole Irvin, it's like 3, 4, 5 miles per hour lower than what they're hitting off Dean Kramer. I don't know, just kind of superficial, just kind of diving through some of these pages here, like right before we came on the air and early this afternoon. I don't know, I've kind of been swayed that I'm going to ride this hot hand with Cole Irvin, because I think the adjustments we saw were real. And yeah, we saw that increased velo, but it was a lot like John Means a couple of years ago. And I know Ben McDonald's talked about this a lot on some broadcasts that Irvin's been pitching. It's like he's reining that velo back down a little bit, and we're seeing everything else tick back up, and it's working for Cole. So I don't know. I think I'm under team. if everybody's healthy, put Kramer in the bullpen right now. And again, what a luxury. Like, how many teams can put a Dean Kramer and Albert Suarez in their bullpen? Injuries are going to happen. We know as soon as Grayson comes back, someone else is going to get hurt. This is baseball. This is what's going to happen. But if it doesn't, and we can have even just a couple of weeks of everybody healthy, that's huge. And it could help these guys like Aiken, like Perez, like Webb, everybody else. I think you can help extend this bullpen a little bit by having multiple long relief guys throwing for you.
Yeah, I totally see that point of view. For me personally, I kind of lean the other way, only because, and I do think that Cole Irvin's performance of late is sustainable. I mean, he hasn't given up a run in almost 3 weeks, so can't argue with that. I think he'll handle it better being moved to a bullpen role. And not to say that Kramer's not a team player, wouldn't be, up for that if push came to shove. But I just feel like he's got that starter's mentality, and it's kind of been working for him. I think we saw Irvin transition into a long relief role last year and worked really well. I just think he would be more game and less rocking the boat if he's the long man / spot starter. Like you said, injuries happen, opportunities will arise, a doubleheader here or there. I think he could handle that role a lot better. Kramer, he's been pitching great. He's given up 19 runs, and most of those are because of he's given up 8 home runs. So he's got a whip under 1. I think some of that he's actually made changes. I think what you're saying about him being like a good 4th or 5th starter described him last year and the year before. I think he's made changes to his arsenal that maybe he can be a legitimate number 3 starter in the majors. I don't know if that'll ever happen. He would need to be more consistent, but I think his cutter has come a long way. I think it has stronger depth this year. It's a little more slider-ish, and his splitter that he's developed has shown flashes of being pretty good. So I say keep him in the rotation for now, but I don't think you can really go wrong either way.
I'll throw this out there as one last question relating to the Major League side before we talk about Norfolk. Danielle Allen Tuck brought this up in a recent episode of the Baltimore Banner Baseball podcast, and it got me wondering, should the Orioles or will the Orioles go to a 6-man rotation early in the year? We saw this down the stretch last year, and it worked pretty well for them. So is that something they would consider when Rodriguez comes back, rather than bump someone down to the bullpen, go with the 6-man rotation for at least the next couple of months and see where it takes them?
I generally, to jump in, am against it. But if you do it, I want Burns to still be on every 5 days. Like, this is your 1 year to have Corbin Burns. Not saying that you run him to the ground, race Tampa Bay race style, but just you got him to be your ace. Let him be your ace. If it means that everyone else gets pushed back a day each time through the rotation, so be it. So that's what I think. I'd prefer just stick to 5, but if you do, Burns stays on his regular rest.
Yeah, that was my initial thought. Like, you got Corbin Burns to be your ace, and you want him making 30, 32, however many starts. You want him going every single 5 days throughout the full season, because when Corbin Burns is on the mound, I'm going to say Colin Burns. When Corbin Burns is on, we don't want Colin Burns on the mound. When Corbin Burns is on the mound, oh man. When Corbin Burns is on the mound, like, you feel better about that day. He gives you an advantage each time he is out there on the mound. So I do also want him going every 5 days. I don't know. I don't know if I like it. Like, we talked about a lot, 3-4 years ago, during some of the dark days, we thought it could make sense with some of these guys. And the Orioles always, I think they came out publicly oftentimes and said, like, we're not doing a 6-man. We're not doing a 6-man. And I know a lot of other teams are doing it. The Dodgers have so many pitchers and they're doing it. Of course, they've got a lot of guys with injury concerns and trying to keep that rotation fresh for the postseason. I think it does make sense, and maybe you can do it later in the year. But for right now, I don't know. For right now, it's May 5th, May 6th. Like, I don't see them doing that right now, even when Grayson comes back and if everybody's fully healthy. I'd prefer, because it's tougher, though, because you can't – Cole Irvin doesn't have any options, right? You're not going to send Dean Kramer down to get other guys innings. I don't know who else that has options. So talking about starters that you're going to send down, you can't send Albert Suarez down. So, like, these guys are kind of stuck here. You've got to use them. I mean, they're not stuck. We want them here. They're pitching very well, but, like, You can't move them and kind of shift things around and be flexible with these guys. I'd prefer just stick with 5. And if you have to stick either Irving or Kramer and Suarez in the bullpen for a couple of weeks, that's fine. Because like I said, you're going to help protect some of those short relief arms a little bit more. Hopefully they don't get overworked this early in the year. And then as the season progresses, these guys can get a little bit extra work. If Tyler Wells comes back, that adds a really fun wrinkle to this entire thing. Of course, he's not, I don't want him in the rotation. You put him in the bullpen, and that's an awesome later season bullpen piece to add. And that's going to help. That's what makes me feel so confident moving forward, because you look at the Yankees, you look at Tampa Bay, although Tampa Bay is just not doing anything this year. I kind of felt like coming into you that Tampa Bay magic was going to eventually run out, and I think it's starting to run out here. Their pitching injuries just become too much. When I look at the rest of the AL East, like none of these teams can match up with this pitching, I think. And to have this luxury of having so many arms, like, let's roll with it. Let's just pound these teams with these extra pitchers, get that advantage, and wrap up the division a little bit earlier. I don't know. Then you can take your foot off the gas and roll back a little bit.
We'll move on now to the minors, because there was a big development on Friday when the Norfolk Tides threw a combined no-hitter in their 2-0 win over the Nashville Sounds. Chase McDermott started the game, and it was his best outing of the year by far. 6 2/3 innings, 11 strikeouts with 2 walks. He was followed in that game by Nolan Hoffman and Caleb Ort. And it's interesting to note that McDermott and Hoffman were actually part of a combined no-hitter last spring in Bowie. So almost an exact year later, they are part of a combined no-hitter in Norfolk. Now, with McDermott, this start was a reminder that when he is throwing strikes consistently, hitters just can't touch him. And that has been a problem for him to this point in the year. In his first 3 starts of the season, he had 5 walks each. And while it's been a little bit more up and down since then, Friday's outing was really the first time we've seen McDermott have full command of his arsenal within a start. And it was a good reminder of how sharp he can be. And while talking about Norfolk a little bit, we should note that Cade Povitz continues his excellent start with the Tides. A 1.11 ERA through his first 32 1/3 innings pitched, 45 strikeouts to 14 walks. So, Nick, I'll start with you here because you talked about this on a daily recently, focusing on McDermott for a minute. When he throws strikes and he's consistently in the strike zone, hitters don't square up on him. Friday's outing was great in the sense that it's a combined no-hitter, a good career achievement for him, but does it represent a turning point in this season where we start to see the command come back after it was not really there for the first few outings of this year?
I hope so. I mean, he took a perfect game into the 7th inning. That is amazing before he walked the first batter in the 7th. It's not this simple, but just freaking throw strikes, man. Like, I know it's way more complicated than that, but I looked at his last 5 starts here and went back through. God bless Baseball Savant being able to dive into some of this for the AAA guys now. But if you look back at his last 5 starts, he was throwing I looked just at the fastball. He was throwing it in the zone between 41 and 44% of the time. He had 1 good start and 1 decent start, not counting this no-hitter, a combined no-hitter he was a part of. But he had 1 good start, 1 decent start, and he was like 43 to 44% in the zone rate with his fastball. But he was also throwing the rest of his pitches in the zone like 42% or higher. And he had decent results. Not great. Again, none of those numbers are great, but he at least had much better results than every other start. He had 2 clunkers in this span of 5 games with similar fastball in zone rates, but his overall in zone rate was sub 40%. And one of those starts, he couldn't make it out of the first inning. The other start, I don't even know. I think it was one of those 5-walk games. It wasn't cutting it. You look at that last start, though, the no-hitter, 60% of his fastballs were thrown in the zone and 50% overall. And look what happened. He has his best outing of the year, and it worked. Like you said, I did touch it on the daily. Like, John Muley wrote extensively about it last year. He throws, and that was back in AA. When he threw his stuff in the zone, he was one of the best, if not the best pitcher in all of baseball, minor league baseball. as far as like opponent's batting average and the exit velos that were coming off of him. It's fantastic. And he wasn't doing that here in AAA. He did it, and look what happened. So again, it's not that simple, but that's something that really stood out to me. And I don't know if like there was an adjustment. Maybe they saw something in his setup. Maybe they saw something in his delivery, and they tweaked it before the start. And he had this stuff. I don't know. I don't know if Justin Ramsey saw something or another analyst, and they were able to tweak it. I'd love to know. But something changed, and whatever changed worked, because that was a fantastic start. And hopefully he can now find some sort of happy medium here, because I don't need him to take a perfect game into the seventh every time. But if he can find some happy medium between a perfect game into the seventh inning and 4 innings, 5 walks, 3 earned runs, 6 strikeouts, you got a pretty darn good pitcher here on your hands.
It's as simple as the stat you just said for him. I mean, if he can throw the ball in the zone over 50% of the time, I think he has the upside of an ace at the major league level. His stuff is that good. It's all comes down to that. And there's a reason we've been calling him right-handed DL Hall for a while. Yeah, I didn't see any of the game. I was on a cruise. I was able to catch some of the Orioles game on Sunday on the plane ride home. I had to buy $8 Wi-Fi just to catch like 6 innings of that game, but I didn't get to see any minor league baseball. Didn't see any box scores till I got home. So this was a pleasant surprise for me. And the fact what you just said, he was throwing strikes, it just makes so much sense in the world. Like between him and Povich, the Orioles got these 2 guys that, man, they could really take a big step at the end of this year if it's in a limited role. But next spring training, these guys are competing for rotation spots in the Orioles coming off their World Series victory. So McDermott, I think this year you want to see the progress and, just throw more and more strikes as the year goes on, get used to whatever they're working with. Maybe when rosters expand in September, he can be a legitimate bullpen weapon. You add him to the bullpen, get him ready for the playoffs if necessary. If people are worried about the bullpen by then, I think he's a legit option to come help that out in a big way. Povich we'll get to, I think, is more of a starter help if the Orioles need it, which they may not, considering what we were just talking about this episode. But yeah, it is obviously encouraging to see that performance.
And that just goes back to what I was saying earlier, that what a luxury. That, I mean, 2 years ago, if Cade Povich wasn't in the majors already, we would be begging. Could you imagine Orioles Twitter? And now it's like, we don't need. I love Cade Povich. What he's doing is fantastic, but there is no rush with Cade Povich. Continue to hone your craft down there in AAA. You're working with Justin Ramsey. You're working with the man down there. You're going to get better. Keep doing that. We don't need you in the major leagues right now. We don't need you in the major leagues right now, Chase McDermott. Keep getting better. And next year, when they're in spring training battling for a rotation spot or some sort of bullpen spot, whatever, like, it's going to be fun. And McDermott, it's just the strikeouts are up. The ground ball rate is up significantly. The home run rate is down. Everything is better this year. It's just the walk rate. And hopefully this was a turning point, though.
Let's wrap real quick with Povich. His most recent outing was not his best in terms of command this season, but he still got the victory. 6 innings, gives up 1 run on 5 hits, 5 strikeouts against 4 walks, and that was last Wednesday against Nashville. And you're absolutely right. If this were 2 years ago, every episode would be, when is Cade Povich going to get called up? Right now, the Orioles don't need him, but with that said, and I'll make this the final question of the episode, do we see Povich this season? And if so, what role is it going to be for him? Is it going to be as a starter? Is it going to be as a bullpen arm? Is it going to be maybe a mixture of the two? What should we expect going forward?
I think so. With Povich, I know his last 2 starts, actually, you've seen the walks creep up a little bit. And I almost wonder at this point, this is part of where with minor league baseball, like, we just don't know what exactly guys are working on. And so my question would be, all right, we see Povich be one of the top pitchers in all of minor league baseball for his first 4 starts or whatever. and then the walks start to tick up. And my question is, are they trying something else? Are they like, this isn't working, or we want to add this, or we want you doing this in this situation, and he's trying to get comfortable doing that, and that's why the walks are up a little bit, but everything else is remaining consistently good? Like, that would be my next question with Povich as far as these walks. Even though like it have been an issue in the past, but I would love to be able to know like the game to game, like what's the game plan here? Because again, minor leagues process over results. But with Povich, I was kind of thinking like, if the Orioles are able to be lucky, continue this luck streak with the injuries, and maybe like I mentioned earlier, like Kramer's a little tight after a start, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to put you on the 15-day or 10-day, whatever it is. We're going to put you on the IL. Take a little bit longer, take a break, get your side work in, but this is your chance to rest here in June or July, whenever it is." But then like a more serious injury happens, and like Irving or Bradish has got to miss like 2-3 weeks now. Not super serious, but like another like real injury. Well, now you got two guys down unexpectedly. Maybe at that point you bring up Cade Povich and he makes 2 or 3 starts. He gets his feet wet. He gets to learn. And then he's got all that video, all that data. He takes it back with Justin Ramsey and they pour over that and they work on that and continue to refine some of what they saw in those 2-3 starts in the major leagues back in AAA to close out the year. Ideally, that's what maybe would happen with Povich, but I think we mentioned this last time we were all together. I don't see them bringing up Povich to work out of the bullpen. I would almost prefer to see them do that with Chase McDermott, because I think the stuff would play much better out of the bullpen with McDermott.
Yeah, completely agree with that last point. Unless it's like playoff roster, this team we're going up against struggles against lefties. Let's bring up Cade Povich as an extra weapon. But during the regular season, yeah, I could see like there's a few injuries at once and you want to give them a look, or hey, doubleheader, you get to pull up someone for free basically and send them right back down. Povich is in line with as far as his schedule goes. And even if it's like, I don't know, we rain out against the Diamondbacks this weekend, please no, not Saturday. And they have to make it up later and they know when that doubleheader is going to be. You line up Povich to fall in line with that and come up and make a spot start. I think he will make his major league debut. I think it's destined to happen this year. I don't know exactly the scenario, but I think maybe a doubleheader is the most likely.
And that does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. We'll be back later this week to talk about 2 prospects who are heating up the plate at the minor league level in Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basayo. You're not going to want to miss that. And as a reminder, we will be at Checker Spot Brewing this Saturday, May 11th, for our live show at 2 p.m. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Threads, Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also find us over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com, and sign up for our Patreon community. Get access to that exclusive Top 50 monthly update that's going to come out this week, as well as your free beer at the live show at Checker Spot Brewing. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, you've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to check in on 2 of the hottest hitters in the Orioles minor league farm system and 2 of their top prospects in Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basayo. We're going to dive into their performances a little bit later on. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And as a reminder, we are going to be at Checker Spot Brewing this Saturday for our live show beginning at 2 p.m. If you have tickets to the Orioles game, stop by ahead of time. It's the perfect time to check in ahead of time, have a beer, watch our show, go to the game. If you don't have tickets to the game, stop by and hang out after the show because Checker Spot's going to have the game on. It's a good place to catch all the action. We'll have a viewing party there. So whether you're a fan of the Orioles or you're going to be the guest splasher on Friday night and you need time to unwind and you want to talk about the Orioles a little bit, perfect time to stop by and check out the live show Saturday at 2 p.m. And as an added bonus, if you are a member of our Patreon community, check the Discord chat sometime between now and Saturday. There's going to be a password posted in there. Mention that password when you go up to the bar, and you will get a free beer. So, again, the perfect way to unwind from being the ceremonial guest splasher on Friday night. Just saying. So, you'll want to check that out. Orioles on the Verge live at Checker Spot Brewing Company. Checker Spot is a short distance from Camden Yards, so look forward to that. Now we'll get into the main topic of this episode, which is that two of the Orioles' top prospects have been hitting the ball pretty well of late. Kobe Mayo with the Norfolk Tides homered in 4 consecutive games over the past week. Samuel Basallo, meanwhile, after a little bit of a rocky start to this season, has started to heat up and came back from a scary situation where he's hit on the wrist on Thursday to play against Erie in Bowie series over the weekend and performed pretty well. So far, over his last 6 games, Basallo has homered 4 times, driven in 10, posted a 1260 OPS, and the walks have started to creep up a little bit. Still down from where they were last year, but he has started to show more patience at the plate. Meanwhile, Mayo has a case as maybe one of the best hitters in all of minor league baseball, not just the Orioles farm system. So far, hitting 309 with a 1,003 OPS, 11 homers, 32 RBIs, and 154 plate appearances. So I'll start with Bob here. And let's talk about Mayo first, because now that Jackson Holiday has been up and been sent down, it seems like Mayo is the prospect that Orioles fans are clamoring for, and for good reason. He's hitting the ball as well, if not better, than he ever has at any point in his minor league career. What else do you think he has to show at Norfolk before we see him in the majors?
Can't hear you.
I knew I was muted, but my computer was frozen, so I couldn't move over to the right tab.
We're all rusty.
Yeah, exactly. Kobe Mayo, man, just nothing is holding him back. He's major league ready. Like, he should be up tomorrow. Improve this lineup. Ramon Arias, I know you went 2 for 3 with the hit by pitch on Sunday, but you got to go, bud, because Kobe Mayo is just doing things in the minor leagues as I wait for my crappy computer to go back over to the Kobe Mayo tab that I had open. I know he's got an 1100 OPS, 175 WRC plus since April 20th. He's been on a real heater since then, batting 310, 1109 OPS, as I was saying. ISO at 414. I mean, just insane. Striking out a lot. But like we've always talked about with Kowser, with his strikeout rate, who cares when you're doing damage like that? Literally, who cares? He's almost walking 11% since April 20th, so the walk rate is coming back up. I do think the defense is improving as the year goes on. I never thought it was all as bad as what some people might have assumed based on just the errors. What can he do? I mean, if it wasn't for the dozens of just notable prospects that the Orioles have brought up recently, I feel like Orioles fans would just be like losing their minds at what we have here. And we still have him. It's just a little more under the radar. It feels like no matter what he does, it's a little bit under the radar, but it's not going to be under the radar in a month or so when he's up in the major leagues and just crushing balls into oblivion over Baltimore.
Yeah, there's like one Brewers fan that stays in our mentions every time we post a Kobe Mayo home run clip. He's like, we could have had this instead of Joey Ortiz. Like,
No,
okay, first of all, the Joey Ortiz disrespect stops there. He's playing well for you, very well for you. But all right, here's my thing with Kobe Mayo. And I've said before how with these prospects, I can be a lot more patient now because the major league team is so good. But I'm going to assume Bob did not read this article because it came out on Friday. But
you would assume right.
did you Zach, did you read the article on Fangraphs by Dan Zamborski? The Orioles are running out of lineup spots.
Yes, I did.
Well, I pulled this up. I didn't see like any conversation about this article, which doesn't shock me because I know Orioles fans and the weird relationship they have with Fangraphs, but it's still my go-to site. So I'm going to pull this article up and I'd like to discuss it a little bit. Dan Zamborski wrote a fantastic piece highlighting, putting the young core of the Orioles lineup into historical perspective. And it is absolutely amazing. Okay. And he talks about, Adley Rutschman winning runner-up for Rookie of the Year. Then Gunnar Henderson wins it the next year. And then Jackson Holliday was the favorite entering this year, comes up, has a clunker, gets sent back down to AAA. But, oh, look, Colton Cowser is now one of the favorites to win AL Rookie of the Year. And no one is talking about Jordan Westberg, who at the time of this writing, I'm looking at his article here, when this article was published on Friday, he had an 890 OPS. I know he had a great weekend, so it's probably even higher now. But he's looking at this. It says, even with Holliday falling flat in his first 10 games in the majors, something Dan Zamborski, expect him to rectify in the not too distant future, the Orioles are leading the league in WAR from players younger than the traditional peak age of 27. So stacked up against every other team in Major League Baseball, team positional player WAR for players 26 and under, the Orioles are at 5.2, which is 1.1 WAR higher than number 2 on that list from the New York Yankees. And that list consists of Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, Jackson Holliday. And then he looks at the projections that include Heston Kjerstad, Kobe Mayo, and Connor Norby. Okay. And he uses his model to project out the rest of season projected WAR for that group would be 21.7 WAR for Henderson, Rutschman, Westberg, Cowser, Holliday, Norby, Kjerstad, all of them, which would rank in, he used post-World War II era, 1969 to 2024, since, back in the many moons ago, there was no service time clock, 18-year-olds getting called up to the major leagues. This Orioles young core and their projected 21.7 WAR for the remainder of the season would rank 5th all-time in baseball since 1969, behind the 88 Reds with Barry Larkin and Eric Davis and Paul O'Neill, the 87 Pirates with Barry Bonds, the 2016 Cubs, the 74 Reds with Johnny Bench, Dave Concepcion, and George Foster. Like, these are historic numbers that this young Orioles core is putting up right now and projects. Then he digs a little bit deeper and looks at just Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, and Connor Norby, and post their Zips rest of season projections. If they were to be called up to the majors right now, and you sim this out for the rest of the year, Kobe Mayo would project a 2.5 WAR, 20 home runs, 25 doubles. Yeah, a lot of strikeouts, but a 2.5 WAR. Kjerstad at 1.6 WAR with 18 home runs. Norby 1.5 WAR, 17 home runs, 22 doubles. So his model would say that Kobe Mayo, if you called him up right now, only hitting 243, but that's okay because almost 50 extra base hits, 2.5 WAR, well above average. All three, he's saying, project as league average or better if they started in the majors right now. When I pull up Ramon Arias page, I'm going to do it. You all know the numbers, but we need to say it out loud.
Yes,
we need to say it out loud here. Also, I don't care that he won a Gold Glove. I really, good for him. Put it on your mantle and show everybody. Show the Jehovah's Witness that knocks on your door. Be like, look, I won that. Now go away. I would be doing that. But I don't care that he won a Gold Glove. He has a 1.9% walk rate. He's hitting 196. He has a WRC plus of 50, and he's worth -0.2 WAR so far. I totally get, I can understand keeping Austin Hayes around, right? I get it. I'm fine with that. I get why you feel comfortable having Ramon Arias on the roster as well. You can play multiple positions. You probably do trust. In fact, I would imagine the Orioles, it's not crazy to say the Orioles probably do trust Ramon Arias' defense better than Mayo's. But at what point is what Kobe Mayo brings to this team offensively going to outweigh the difference in defensive value from dropping from Ramon Arias to Kobe Mayo? And like Bob said, like, we're not talking about a terrible third baseman here. People want to paint him as this god-awful third baseman. He's not. Yeah, maybe the defense does take a hit, but what you're gaining in offense potentially, I've changed my tune, and I just think at this point, and I've seen some other like prospect evaluators out there in the Twitter sphere saying, it's just a couple of days now. I forget his name, but whoever it was that writes for Baseball America now was like, he's got to come up in like the next couple of weeks.
JJ Cooper, I think.
Maybe I forget
I
who
know
it was
he's
at this
written about
point. Like I'm changing my tune here, and I'm just like, what else does Kobe Mayo have to do? Like that's a good question, because I think all the data seems pretty clear, but again, it is that trust factor. I do get that, like, but this kid, that Batman, that could really be a potentially special bat. If Kobe Mayo is in any other system, well, in how, not every system, but in how many other systems, if Kobe Mayo is your top prospect, are you waiting to build your franchise around him, or are you waiting for him to reach the majors and then you hit go on getting out of your rebuild? Like, and in the Orioles, it's just like he's just another guy. He's just another prospect in this organization. But I've changed my tune. You've got to bring Kobe Mayo up. I think soon, like real soon. I think he could be a pretty big difference maker here for this team.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's getting to the point where you have to figure out how you're going to fit Mayo into the lineup because he brings right-handed power that, in terms of raw power, there's not an Orioles hitter who can match what Mayo does on the roster right now. There just isn't from the right side. The left side is a different story, but from the right side, no one can match Mayo's raw power. I think really what it's going to, and this is the same for every Orioles prospect that has come up so far. There needs to be that runway where you feel like you're comfortable running him out for an extended period of time, see how he adjusts, and go from there. The Orioles thought that they had that runway with Jackson Holliday earlier this year, but they felt like at the end of that he had things he needed to work on. He was sent down. Now, if you look at some other players that have come up in recent years, whether it's Adley Rutschman or Gunnar Henderson, their situations were a little bit different. If Mayo does come up, he's going to be under a lot of pressure because this Orioles team is winning. And if he takes the roster spot of a veteran like Ramon Arias, who's DFA'd, and it's not an IL situation, but he's DFA'd, that adds to the pressure. But do I think Mayo can handle it? Absolutely, I think he can. So they got to look to bring him up sooner rather than later.
And
oh, go ahead, Nick.
Jorge Mateo, like he's playing well right now. I think I don't want people to fall into that trap that we fell into like first half last year, where I think I even made the comment like, am I gonna start drafting Jorge Mateo in like second half best ball drafts? Like I might. I don't want to fall into that trap again, but like, all right, you get rid of Ramon Arias and you bring Kobe Mayo up to play third base. That's what he's gonna play. You still got Mateo there. What if Mayo does come up and he does struggle and you have to send him back down like Holiday? There's nothing wrong with that. It very well could happen. That's okay. But you still got Jorge Mateo there who can play second base. You can slide Westberg back over. He can play third base. If Ramon Arias is gone, you guys send Mayo back down. You put Westberg at third. You have Mateo playing more second base. You can find somebody to fill that void for a couple of weeks there until Holiday. Maybe by that point, Holiday's ready to come back up, and you plug Holiday back in at second base, slide Westberg over to third base. I think because of that, I mean, if you need to, worst comes to worst, Nick Maton's about done with his minor league rehab. Plug him up for a couple of days. I don't care. You got to bring him up at some point because Ramon Arias, like, thank you for your service. I respect what you've done, but like that Kobe Mayo doesn't give a damn about that wall out in left field. It was Baseball America who, if you look at his metrics this year, Kobe Mayo is putting up 80 grade power. 80 grade power. The scale doesn't go any higher. Like, let's do it already.
Yeah, and people said when Holiday was sent down, how long till he comes back? How long till he comes back, do you think? To me, he ain't coming back before Kobe Mayo makes his major league debut and gets his shot to do what Holiday got a chance to do earlier in the year, a few weeks ago. Obviously, I just think, Mateo, like you're saying, I think we all bit into that April hype a little bit too much last year, but he does more things well than Arias. I think he's a better bench player, better fit for the current roster. Yeah, I'm going to start pounding the table if he's not up by this time next week, I think.
I'm of the mindset that Mateo is a perfectly fine role player who has settled into a role that is tailor made for him. Bounce around a little bit, come up and hit against left-handed pitching. Otherwise, he's mostly on the bench and available as a late inning defensive replacement or a pinch runner. I think that is a perfect role for him. I don't want to see him go anywhere anytime soon. So it is probably Arias who would become expendable at that point. But I'll move on now to Samuel Basayo. And Basayo has had kind of a tough start to the season on multiple levels. The elbow injury kept him from catching early on, and then his offensive performance through the first week or so was kind of middling. We weren't really seeing the power. Strikeouts were up, walks were way down. But now all of a sudden, we're starting to see the Samuel Basayo that we saw last year. If you look at Bowie series against Erie, Basayo appeared in 4 games last week, belted 2 home runs in that span. And big credit to him for coming back from a tough situation where he hit on the wrist by a pitch on Thursday night, visibly in a lot of pain. We weren't sure how soon we were going to see him back on the field after that. He comes back out the next night and goes 1 for 4 and then wraps up the series with a 2 for 5 performance on Sunday. So, Bob, I'll start with you here. Do you think that Basayo, and not to mention, by the way, he's back behind the plate catching again, do you think that he's turning a corner here where we're going to start to see the Samuel Basayo that we saw last year?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we mentioned it in that first episode we did after the season started, that, or at least I said that I think this is just, early season struggle, quote unquote, a few games. And realistically, I almost feel like you can throw out the first 7 games of the season for him. I mean, obviously you literally cannot, but he had a delayed spring training. He had a weird spring training. He didn't start playing the field until like the season actually started. He starts first 7 games, 6 for 30, 200 batting average, only 1 extra base hit, a double, 0 walks, 11 strikeouts. So that's not good, obviously. Since then, he's gone on to hit 292 with an 887 OPS, 149 WRC plus, 262 ISO, and where 11 strikeouts and 30 at bats is a pretty high strikeout rate. His strikeout rate since then is 20.3, much more in line with what we would expect from our boy Sammy B. Walk rate only 4.3% since then. I think, he's an aggressive guy. I think his walk rate got better as last year went on, and maybe that will be the case here as well. But there's a weird thing going on with this organization as a whole, especially at the major league level when it comes to the walk rate that we would expect from certain guys. So, and I have a theory on that in the Discord that it seems intentional, but who knows what that is, because obviously it hasn't affected the offense. It's one of the best offenses in baseball despite that. But back to Samuel Basayo, I think basically I'm almost treating the first week or so of the season as like a continuation of his spring training, just getting loose, getting back in the swing of things, and now that he's up and running and back to full speed here, catching, playing first base, he looks every bit the part I would expect to look, at least on the past week, again, just based on highlights and box scores. But yeah, I'm excited to see him continue to grow throughout the season like he did last year, and how high he can go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just these last 2 series. He's got a WRC plus of 190. He's settling in pretty well. And I do agree that he's a 19-year-old kid who experienced his first major injury, and that messed up his spring training. It interrupted his offseason. He's also trying to settle into AA, where he only had, a week, 2 weeks in AA to close out the year. If he's not the youngest player in the league, he's like the second or third youngest player in the league. I don't know off the top of my head exactly where he ranks there, but how many other 19-year-olds are in AA right now? He's back behind the plate, and I just think it's funny that it's kind of coincided, him getting back behind the plate and his offensive output has started to all happen around the same time. Like, the kid just wanted to get back behind the plate and be normal again, I guess. Like you mentioned the numbers there. He's striking out less. He's walking more. I don't think it's a homer take, or we get this comment all the time, viewing Basayo through orange colored glasses. I don't think it's that to say that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg with Samuel Basayo. He doesn't turn 20 until mid-August. So he's going to play what, like 80%, 85% of the season as a 19-year-old in AA who could very realistically end the year in AAA. And he's not even developed into his grown man body yet. He's still a teenager. And I think defensively, like obviously we haven't been able to watch him much this year at catcher because that just started. But last year he showed off the strong arm. He steals strikes. He's an above average defender behind the plate. And I think even if he does get bigger, he's going to be good enough. He's a good enough defender to be Adley's backup while primarily playing first base DH, which, like, by the way, like fantastic reaction time and reflexes he showed over the weekend over at first base. I think that was Saturday's game. He made a great play. It was so fast the camera couldn't even catch up. But I think he's primed for a pretty special season down there in Bowie once he fully settles in, which I think he's starting to do already. And it's the first week of May.
I'll throw out this question about Basayo, and we can wrap here on this, which is, a player starts to perform well. The question comes up, when are they going to get promoted? And I've talked on a recent episode about how there actually is a little bit of a logjam at catching if you look in the Orioles farm system, but a prospect like Basayo is not going to be blocked from Norfolk. So keeping in mind that he's starting to heat up the plate, but at the same time has not had a lot of innings at catcher this season, what seems like a realistic time frame for him getting to Norfolk, provided the performance down the throughout the next couple of months warrants a promotion?
I'm gonna say post All-Star break. So what, mid-July for the minor leagues, or early to mid-July? I could see that being like the earliest.
Yeah, I mean, you got David Benuelos, who somehow remains in this organization even through all the roster movement. Michael Perez is there in Norfolk as well. I feel like you can probably get rid of one of those guys. And even if like Maverick Hanley is your taxi squad guy, or you get rid of one of Benuelos or Perez, the other becomes your taxi squad guy. And then you've got Hanley and Basayo. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way, because Ardway is having a really good year too, but maybe you see more in his bat and you decide to keep him in AA, let him hang out in AA for a little while longer. But I imagine there is a way that you can get Basayo and Ardway up at AAA by the end of the year. And then both of these guys, right, maybe eventually Maverick Hanley becomes your taxi squad guy. And now you've got two fantastic catchers, one an offensive-minded catcher, and then one of your top defensive-minded catchers in the system in AAA, which is another great problem that this organization is going to have. But
we'll wrap up now with the final segment of our episode, where we like to shout out players outside of the top 30 portion of our top 50 prospects list, whether it's been something that they've done lately, like a good game, a good week, or maybe there's something in their stat line that we just want to point out. And we always pick a hitter and a pitcher for this segment. I'm going to start with Nick, who has a hitter that we shouted out a lot a couple of years ago when he was in the Dominican Summer League, and a pitcher from last year's draft class who's off to a very good start this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go the hitter first. Aaron Estrada, 19-year-old switch hitting infielder who's listed at just 5'8". So I think he's from Venezuela as well. So is he like our little Jose Altuve that we've got over here? Except we paid Estrada, I think, a lot more money. But Delmarva had a really solid week, actually, which is great to see. Thomas Sosa continues to just hit doubles and steal bases. He had 8 stolen bases last week alone. But Aaron Estrada also stood out. He had, let me see his numbers here. Month of April, he had a 155 average, a 189 on base percentage, 2 walks to 18 strikeouts, which is odd because in the DSL and the FCL over the last 2 years, he had more walks and strikeouts. But clearly, like as a reminder, making that jump from the FCL to low A is incredibly difficult now. Well, in the month of May, 5 games, but he's hitting 333 with a 500 on base percentage, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, and he's 4 for 4 in stolen bases. I really hope that this is him kind of settling in and turning a corner, because he's like the next Ben Cosme, Enrique Bradfield. Not that he has their talents, but he's a unique player, I think, in this organization. And the organization is clearly pretty high on him. So I'm intrigued to see like how they deploy these types of players because they're not your prototypical power hitting slugger. But my pitcher, I'm gonna go Zach Fruit. Like, I didn't know earlier today if he was gonna crack our top 50 or not. I don't think he did. He should be in our top 50. He is quickly becoming one of my favorite pitchers to watch in this system. Physically, he's Kyle Bradish 2.0. He's actually an inch taller and 3 pounds lighter than Bradish, based on their player pages right now. Their delivery is pretty similar as well. Coming out of the draft, physically, Kyle Bradish, also the stuff wise, Mason McCray comped him to Mason Miller. So I know everybody's like, we need Mason Miller. We need Mason Miller. I'm like, this is like I want McDonald's. And your mom says we got McDonald's at home. We got McDonald's at home. We got Mason Miller at home. It's Zach Fruit. He touches 99, sweeper, curve, changeup. McCray actually projected 355 plus grade pitches in the fastball, sweeper, and curve, but he's making his pro debut this year in high A, 25 strikeouts in 21 innings. And this past week, he made his one start, career high 5 innings, career high 7 strikeouts, just one walk in that outing. He's got a 51% ground ball rate. The FIP is actually half run lower at 2.4, not 2.45 than his ERA. I watch probably more Zach Fruit than any other starter in this organization, if I'm being honest. This kid is I'm falling in love with Zach Fruit. And I love the comments we get on Twitter too about when he makes it to the majors, like like the fruit stand in the stands, like all the different ideas. People are already loving the different things the play on the Fruit last name. It's fun.
Fruit Ninja, classic app. Great choices. I love Aaron Estrada. He's one of my guys, Short King. I'm going to go with Anderson De Los Santos, who is a guy in our top 50, but after a solid first game or two with Delmarva, he was pretty dreadful for a couple weeks there. But I mean, it's only 5 games, but in the past week or so, he batted .333 with a 733 OPS, 124 WRC plus, 0 ISO. So he was only hitting singles, but it was nice to see the contact there. 10% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate. Maybe this is the start of the breakout bounce back Anderson De Los Santos season that we've kind of been predicting for a while now since last season ended. And my pitcher is a guy who was promoted to AAA over this past couple of days, Cade Stroud, who we've talked about a lot recently. That was John Muley's guy a couple years ago, and it finally seems to be happening. 26 years old, so obviously not a spring chicken, but now that he's in AAA, he's one step away from the majors. The big thing with him was always the walks, and he only has 1 walk allowed so far this season, 10 1/3 innings pitched, 11 strikeouts. Obviously, I think he's got that really fast fastball, high velocity fastball, can touch triple digits, but I feel like he's relying on it a lot less this year. And he has really nasty breaking stuff as well, and he's going to that more often. And maybe that was the key to unlock the success that some people thought was coming for the past few years now. But I think Cade Stroud, he could be a guy that makes the majors this year and maybe is a high octane arm to pair with Felix Bautista as soon as next year, once Bautista's back on the mound.
Yeah, Stroud and Cameron Weston both earning recent promotions. Weston from Aberdeen to Bowie, and then Stroud from Bowie to Norfolk. Both of them well-deserved. And I agree that Stroud right now is making a case to be a relief option later in the year. I'm going to start my hitter, Anthony Servideo, who had a really good series for Bowie against Erie last week. He appeared in 4 games and hit safely in all 4 of them. And his best game was actually on Saturday, when he went 3 for 4 with a home run. In fact, he homered in back-to-back games. So a good run for him. And then for my pitcher, I'm going with Braxton Bragg. We've talked about Delmarva's pitching staff a lot to this point in the season, but Bragg has not been mentioned to this point, I don't believe. And what's interesting about him is that his first outing of the year was really bad. 5 runs given up in an inning and a third, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, hit a batter, surrendered a home run. Since then, he has walked just one batter, has not given up a home run, and the strikeouts have been piling up along the way as he's fanned 23 batters in 14 and two-thirds innings pitched. And his start last week against Fayetteville, or his relief outing against Fayetteville last week, was one of his strongest to this point in the season. 4 solid innings, 5 strikeouts, no walks, just 1 hit allowed. He has now struck out 25 batters while walking just 3 through his first 16 innings of this year. And to give a little bit of background on Bragg for any listeners who might not be familiar with him, he was the Orioles' 8th-round pick last year out of Dallas Baptist University. So keep an eye out to see what he does the rest of the way because he is off to a very good start at Delmarva. And that does it for this week's episode. We will be back later this week with our live episode from Checker Spot Brewing. As a reminder, that will take place Saturday, May 11th, beginning at 2 p.m. If you have tickets to the Orioles Diamondbacks game, stop by ahead of time and watch us. If you don't have tickets to the game, come for the show and then stay afterwards because Checker Spot will have the game on. We'll have a little bit of a viewing party. Friend of the show, Connor Newcomb, the host of Locked On Orioles, is going to be joining us as a guest. We're also going to take questions from the audience. And of course, we might announce more guests between now and Saturday. So keep an eye out on our social media channels, of which there are many, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also find us at Patreon and at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And as a reminder, over on Patreon this week, we're going to have our new monthly update to the top 50 prospects countdown. And if you join Patreon and you join our Discord channels, you get a password to get a free beer during our live show on Saturday. So be sure to take advantage of that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.